He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love.
A historic moment for the United States. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi presides over the vote to impeach Donald Trump, making him the first president to be sanctioned twice. Courts is opening a new flagship store, taking over 6 stories of retail space at the Heron, recently vacated by Robinsons. And making the most of the coastline, thrill seekers look to the waters around Singapore for new experiences. 5:30 p.m. here in Singapore. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Big news out of the US today, with President Donald Trump impeached for the second time by the House of Representatives. This making him the first American president to be impeached twice. If you recall, he was first impeached in 2019 for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. All 222 House Democrats and 10 Republicans voted to charge Mr. Trump with incitement of insurrection following last week's attack on the Capitol by a pro-Trump mob. Now, at a ceremony where she signed the article of impeachment, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the vote showed that no one is above the law.
Today, in a bipartisan way, the House demonstrated that no one is above the law, not even the President of the United States. That Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to our country, and that once again, we honored our oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution.
Well, 2 hours after the vote, Mr. Trump issued his strongest condemnation yet of political violence. As he's still banned from major social media platforms, his 5-minute-long statement was uploaded on the White House accounts, where he also called for unity and urged his supporters to promote peace.
I want to be very clear. I unequivocally condemn the violence that we saw last week. Violence and vandalism have absolutely no place in our country and no place in our movement. There has been reporting that additional demonstrations are being planned in the coming days, both here in Washington and across the country. I have been briefed by the U.S. Secret Service on the potential threats. Every American deserves to have their voice heard in a respectful and peaceful way. That is your First Amendment right. But I cannot emphasize that there must be no violence, no law breaking, and no vandalism of any kind.
So the next major step is for the Senate to have a trial to determine Mr. Trump's guilt. But the Senate is currently in recess and is not scheduled to return until January the 19th. The Straits Times' foreign editor, Bhagya Srigareka, is here to take this discussion further. So Bhagya, back in 2019, Mr. Trump was acquitted by the Senate during his first impeachment trial. The charge, of course, is different in this one. And if a trial begins after Inauguration Day on Jan 20th, Republicans would no longer hold a majority in the Senate. So what are the odds then of Mr. Trump being convicted this time?
Actually, the odds remain uncertain at this point. The maths is this, that you have, after the 2 Democrats from Georgia are sworn into the cabinet, there's going to be 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats in the Senate, which has 100 seats. Right, so for conviction, you have to have support from 2/3 majority, and which means at least 17 Republican senators have to support, the conviction move. And it's not clear that this will happen. The leader of the Republicans in the Senate, Mr. Mitch McConnell, as we know, has already said that he has not yet decided whether he will vote to convict him. He says he wants to hear the legal arguments first. In fact, most of the Republicans in the Senate have not openly said they will vote to convict him. They have said they are critical of his role of Mr. Trump's role in inciting the insurrection. Now, there is an opinion poll as well, Olivia, that I thought I'd mention. It's out today. It's by Politico, that American news website. And what it tells you is that Mr. Trump remains the top choice for his party's, as his party's presidential candidate for 2024. So for these reasons, you can tell that, the ground and the opinion about Mr. Trump is not very clear yet.
Right. Well, all these efforts to impeach him, Mr. Trump will no longer even be the president this time next week. So why is impeachment still worthwhile, Bhagya? And what is the strategy there from the Democrats?
Okay, so first of all, impeachment is a way to hold a president accountable. It shines a light on the conduct or the misconduct of the president. It's the citizens which have the biggest stake in that. It's not a matter merely for politicians. So therefore, even after Mr. Trump becomes ex-president next week, the impeachment and conviction would have this important moral value. Additionally, if Mr. Trump is convicted in a Senate trial which follows, it means that he cannot run for president in 2024. And that's a pretty significant outcome for the Republicans. Then the decks are clear for a new party, new party leader for the Republicans to take Mr. Trump's place, and then he can redefine the party.
Right. So Bhagya, if the trial only proceeds after January the 20th, of course, that's Inauguration Day, and the Senate is preoccupied with that, how does it affect the Biden administration and its agenda?
So it does depend on how the trial goes. And if you look at past impeachment trials, they've lasted anything from between 3 weeks to 3 months. And so if it's quick, then the damage to Mr. Biden's governance agenda is going to be limited. Otherwise, if it's protracted, it's going to affect the pace at which he can carry out his agenda. The confirmation and the appointment of his cabinet members could be delayed. He has a pretty ambitious 100-day agenda, and that could be delayed. This is the time when American presidents, when they come in, they make the boldest moves. And the trial is going to be a big distraction from that. And if you look in an even wider way, then the polarization that we've seen in the country could deepen further. And Mr. Biden, who does want to unify the nation, that's going to be a big impediment for him.
Right. Well, Bhagya, you said earlier that there are Republicans who are critical of Trump. It remains to be seen, of course, whether that will materialize in the Senate trial. But earlier, 10 House Republicans voted yes to impeachment. So how can the GOP recover from the Trump presidency, even if, as you mentioned, polls show that Trump is still the top candidate as the Republican presidential nominee in 2024?
It is a bit tricky. So for the Republicans, they have to distance themselves from Mr. Trump, but they have to keep a line open to his voters. Firstly, we do know that Mr. Trump's base is very real, right? He did win the second highest number of votes that a US presidential candidate has won in an election. And he did address concerns which are very real to American voters. Especially those who felt neglected by both parties. Now, because of these things, the Republicans have to make sure that they do not demonize Mr. Trump to the extent that they lose his voters. But at the same time, this is a time when they have to put distance between themselves and Mr. Trump. For one thing, they could run out of money. We've been reporting that American companies have said they are not going to be supporting lawmakers who back Mr. Trump's claims that the election was somehow fraudulent and he was deprived of a victory. So they have to make that distinction between themselves and Mr. Trump. It also depends to a large extent on what is the fate of Mr. Trump eventually. Is he convicted? In that case, he's not going to be able to run in the next election. Are there lawsuits against him? Are there long trials which discredit him? In that case, again, it becomes easier for the party to distance himself from Mr. Trump. Another possibility, Mr. Trump could somehow portray himself as a victim of dirty Washington politics, and then he can continue to channel grievances. He can remain popular at the fringes of the party, and I think eventually he may lose relevance in politics.
Thank you very much, Bhagya, for laying out all these scenarios and all the issues as well, and of course for joining me today. I've been speaking with Bhagya Srigareka, foreign editor at the Straits Times. Meanwhile, U.S. security forces are mounting a national operation to thwart any violence before President-elect Joe Biden takes office. Federal and state officials are evaluating online threats and menacing messages while making sure the security operation has the force to repel an attack. Local officials in battleground states where Mr. Biden won have also stepped up security. But of course, the biggest operation is in Washington, D.C., where some 20,000 National Guard troops will be available for Mr. Biden's inauguration next Wednesday. Back home, 45 new COVID-19 cases confirmed today, including one in the community. The remaining 44 were imported, and this is the highest number of imported cases since March 23rd, when there were 48. The Health Ministry will share more details later tonight. Home appliance megastore Courts will take over the prime retail space at the Heron, which was vacated by Robinsons last month. As Courts' new flagship and biggest outlet here, it will occupy all 6 stories. It's expected to open in the first quarter of 2022. According to a study by gender equality organization AWARE, 2 in 5 workers have been sexually harassed at work in the past 5 years in the form of unwelcome sexual advances or remarks. About 1 in 3 of such cases were at the hands of their boss or someone more senior. But only 1 in 3 victims reported the harassment to their boss, a senior person at work, or their HR department. Those who did not said they wanted to forget the unpleasant experience or felt that what they had experienced was not serious enough. Some also felt they had no evidence of the wrongdoing. About 20% of reported cases found that the harasser faced no consequence despite evidence of their offense. Ing's Heritage at North Point City had its license suspended following a gastroenteritis incident affecting 26 people. The Health Ministry and Singapore Food Agency said 5 people are currently in hospital in stable condition, with 1 additional case discharged. The suspension would require Ing's Heritage food handlers and hygiene officers to reattend and pass their respective food hygiene courses before they can resume work. It's also required to clean and sanitize its premises, including equipment and utensils. Singapore Airlines raised $500 million in its first US dollar denominated bond issue, with final demand reaching more than $2.85 billion. Proceeds from the bond issue will be used for aircraft purchases, related payments, and other general purposes, including refinancing of existing borrowings. The 5-year bonds, which carry an annual coupon of 3% per annum, are due to mature in July 2026. Now, over the past week, tens of millions of people have downloaded Signal and Telegram, spurred by WhatsApp announcing changes to its privacy policy. The changes allow some WhatsApp data to be shared with parent company Facebook. Users who don't agree to these changes will have to stop using the app altogether. So let's clarify what the new terms entail. Now, this is a frequently asked question on the issue. Can WhatsApp and Facebook read my messages or listen in on my calls and keep tabs on who I chat with? The answer is no. Personal messages are protected by end-to-end encryption, and WhatsApp assured users that they, quote, will never weaken this security and clearly label each chat so you know our commitment. WhatsApp also said that it doesn't keep messaging or call logs, although mobile carriers and operators traditionally store this information. Next question, can WhatsApp and Facebook see my location when I share it on the app? Well, just like personal messages, user location is protected by end-to-end encryption, so no one can see the location except the people it was shared with. And lastly, will WhatsApp share my contacts with Facebook? Well, no, WhatsApp doesn't share a user's contact list with other apps from Facebook. But when a user gives it permission, WhatsApp accesses only the phone numbers from the address book to make messaging fast and reliable between the platforms. Well, more of your questions answered in the link below if you're watching us on YouTube. Time for this week's Life Picks. I know the weather has been gloomy lately, but when that clears, why not venture to the waters around Singapore? Travel correspondent Clara Locke writes that water sports like jet skiing and wake surfing are becoming more popular, yachting and coastal tours as well. But Clara, let's focus on two activities today: yacht rentals and coastal tours in these inflatable boats. I know you tried that, so please share more. Your experience sounded amazing on this rigid hull inflatable boat. So if our viewers want to try it out for themselves, what should they expect?
So these rigid hull inflatable boats are actually designed for military and security operations, and they are run by a company, Kairos Strategic, which has been distributing these boats for over 10 years. And late last year, they ventured into offering coastal joyrides in these boats, which are meant for these military operations. So they are meant to be super fast and yet really stable and safe. So when you're on the boat, it feels a lot like you're in a roller coaster but on the water. So when the driver executes all these like sharp turns and jumps the wakes of passing ships and ferries, it's all very thrilling, but at the same time it feels really safe and also a much more visceral experience than going to a theme park, because you're out at sea, you see the water around you, you feel the spray and you feel the salt water on your skin. And it just feels like you're miles away from this QR coded and safely distanced garden city that we're all in. And I think that's part of the appeal for people who want to go out and do these things, because what people miss about travel, I think, is the thrill of trying new things and the rush of adventure. And that's what you get, going out on a tour with them at sea.
Oh.
But beyond the thrill of these tours, they also want to showcase Singapore's maritime heritage. So going out at sea with them, compared to if you take a ferry to Lazarus Island or St. John's Island, it's quite different because you get up close to a lot of different sites. For example, you can pull up near to the smaller of the two sisters islands, where there's a turtle hatchery run by NParks, and it's not open to the public, but you can kind of get up close to it on a tour with them. And then you can also see maybe, some of these roll-on, roll-off ships, shipping tankers, carrying all this cargo that's actually a huge part of Singapore's importance, but we don't normally see it on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's what they want to showcase, this side of Singapore that you see from the water.
Ooh, well, definitely an activity to check out. Clara, you also wrote that the yacht rental business is booming. Some platforms have reported that their bookings have spiked by more than 100%. So how come this rise in popularity?
So for people going out to sea on yachts, I think it's also a sense of wanting to do something different, go out for a getaway. One of the people I interviewed proposed to his then girlfriend, now wife, on a catamaran last August. And he said that even though they were only on the water for 4 hours, it felt a lot different from being in Singapore. It felt like a vacation, even more so than a staycation they did along Orchard Road, because in the city, you're walking around malls, you feel like you're still in Singapore, but out on the water, he said it felt quite different. And I guess there are many more who feel the same way, because there are people booking yachts for intimate celebrations like birthday parties, proposals, and these birthday parties are not just among young people, you also get people in their 70s, 80s going out to sea for a different experience. It does help that prices have fallen. So I spoke to the people behind Yachtly, which is a yacht rental platform, and they said that prior to the pandemic, if you rent a 33-seater catamaran, it used to cost about $3,300, but now you can rent the same boat for just under $2,000. So even though you are paying more per person, if you're going to get the whole boat anyway, it's a lower cost to go out at sea and just have half a day of fun.
Right. Well, thank you so much for that, Clara. You just heard from Clara Locke, travel correspondent for the Straits Times. We have something slightly different from our food critic today. Wong Ah-Yoke usually reviews restaurants and eateries, but he's got some recommendations from a new food court this time. Welcome, Ah-Yoke. So, Boleh Boleh has been open since December 25th, and it's where you can go for Malaysian hawker fare without pork. Your top recommendations, please. The must-try dishes at Boleh Boleh.
Boleh Boleh is a pork-free food court. It's a sister outlet of Malaysia Boleh. Malaysia Boleh has pork, but Boleh Boleh is pork-free. And for Boleh Boleh, I would say go for the dishes where the pork is not so important. So char kway teow, I think the lard is important, so that's not such a good choice. But go for things like asam laksa, because asam laksa, there's no pork in it. And the version at Boleh Boleh is really good. It's not overly sour, so you can still taste the fish, and there's a substantial amount of fish in the broth. So I really like the broth. You can taste the ikan kembung in it. So that's one of my top choices. And even with pork dishes, there are certain dishes that they do very well. For example, the wonton mee, they swap the char siu with chicken char siu, but because char siu has a very strong marinade flavor, so you don't really miss the pork. And they do it really well. So the noodles come with the char siu and 2 deep fried wonton with minced chicken filling. And the noodles are really very nice, very smooth, a little bit springy. So that's another of my recommendations. And also the Penang prawn mee soup, that's good too. So they put in chicken meat and then there's prawns, but the broth is what does it for me. It's really rich, full body. Yeah. So these 3 are my top choices. And also, if you like dim sum, okay, you'll never think that no pork dim sum would be good, but they do it really very well here too. And for like I said before, pick those that are non-pork items. So like the har gow, the shrimp dumpling. That is very well done. It's really almost as good as in the restaurants. The skin is really thin. Then there's another item which I like a lot called steamed gula melaka cake. In Chinese, we call it malai gao. It's very fluffy, full of the fragrance of gula melaka. So that's another good choice.
Wow, great recommendations there. Definitely a wide choice to choose from over at Boleh Boleh. Now, it is newly open, so I expect crowds will be attracted to this new food court. So when you went there, Ah-Yoke, was it packed? So it's something that diners can keep aware of when they go over in the spirit of social distancing and everything.
That's right. Yeah, when I went, it was opening day, so it was very crowded. There were queues at a lot of the stores, especially the more popular items. But I noticed that people were still following the rules. I mean, the queue with like a gap in between people, and the tables were not really that close together. So it was crowded, but I think if everyone follows the rules, it's still okay. But then, if you really want to be safe and you don't want to like mix it with the crowd, you can always do takeaways. That will really solve the issue.
And that was the Straits Times' food critic, Wong Ah-Yoke. Boleh Boleh is located on the 4th level of Clemency Mall. And while it is pork-free, its halal certification is still pending and it's expected to take more than a month. Okay, let's move on to the first concert series of 2021. The Alive series will be held at the Capitol Theatre from next Thursday. And here to tell us more about it is music correspondent Dino Abdul Hadi. Welcome, Dino. So, a 6-day concert series. What can music lovers expect from this one?
Well, for one thing, the concert organizers IMC Live has made it a series that has a little bit of something for everyone. For example, it kicks off on next Thursday, Volume 1. Quite a few singers from the local Malay pop community will be appearing at that concert. For example, you've got Art Fazil, you've got Hairul Anwar. These are very popular singers among the Malay pop music listeners. And then for Sing Yao fans, Mandu pop fans, Jimmy Ye is doing a solo concert, and he's sold out all 250 tickets for his shows. What I heard is within a few days, all the tickets to his shows are sold out. And if you're a hip hop fan, there's one night where you've got rappers The Lion City Boy and Fariz Jabbar. performing, and with mediocre haircut crew performing in the same night. So, and then there's one night that has not one but two cultural medallion winners, Jeremy Montero and Luis Soliano, performing at a jazz concert. So you can see that every night is catered towards it doesn't matter whether you're a Mando pop fan or you're a local Malay pop fan, you're a jazz fan, you're a hip hop fan. There's a little bit of something for everyone at each of the concerts in this series.
I've been speaking with Dino Abdul Hadi, music correspondent for the Straits Times. Now, tickets for the Alive series are priced from $58 to $118 per show. You can also check out the Friday pages in tomorrow's live section for more ideas on what you can do this weekend. And of course, visit straitstimes.com for more news and videos. I'm Olivia Quay. See you tomorrow on The Big Story.